Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today as we take an inside look at the rise and fall of ECW. This would be the way that WWE would cash in on basically acquiring all the rights and trademarks, the tape library of ECW when it went into bankruptcy in 2000 or 2001 when they closed the doors. This would be, honestly, in my mind, one of the biggest WWE DVDs of all time. Not only is it packed with a great documentary and a good selection of matches, but the sales of this DVD blew the expectations of WWE out of the water. To me, what we know as a WWE documentary got birth from the rise and fall of ECW. Even though they might tell stories that make WWE look really good, and sometimes if you scratch at a story, maybe it turns out that it isn't 100% the way that WWE wants it told on its WWE DVDs. But if you go back to 2002, when WWE started pumping out a lot of documentaries, they made a Triple H one, they made an NWO one, the Monday Night War one. A lot of those ones are popular because they're old. But honestly, you go back and you watch, Hulk Rules. Those documentaries suck, especially The Undertaker, This Is My Yard. 2002, 2003, WWE didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know if they wanted their documentaries to be kayfabe. They didn't want to know if they was, pull back the curtain and show what is going on really behind the scenes. And to this one, they just say, fuck it. We want to show the best story that we can tell. And, we're going to let, Paul Heyman and the guys at ECW go on there and talk about their blood, guts, and horrors and all of the stories that went with ECW. And we're not going to try and sugarcoat it, and make it look like, WWE pieces of candy or anything like that. We're going to try and tell the story really the way it is. And to me, from the sales of the rise and fall of ECW, we got the ECW pay-per-view of 2005, one night only, which then they came back and did another one in 2006, which was a little bit more WWE glorified, with the main event of Rob Van Dam versus John Cena for the WWE Championship. And then after that, we got the birth of ECW coming to light on Sci-Fi, with Sandman caning the alien and all kinds of things like that. We got Kevin Thorne, the vampire, with Shelly Martinez, and WWECW. Maybe it wasn't as good as it was supposed to be. Almost like when WWE brought back Saturday Night's Main Event. Old school fans like me went crazy, and then once it was, on our television screens, we were looking at it like, this isn't at all what I thought we were going to get. But the reason why we got that is because Vince learned that ECW, even though it was dead, fans were still out there, and fans wanted more. So we'll take a peek at this one, bust this one open. This one, of course, has two discs. Both discs pretty much look the same. We've got the ECW insert on the inside. This documentary, I believe, ranks in at 2.5 hours. You get everything from, little snippets about how guys came to the company, what they meant to the company, what they did. You got, the early days of ECW with Public Enemy, Taz, Sabu, and Terry Funk, leading into Terry Funk winning the championship, Paul Heyman getting fired, and coming to ECW. Lots of stories that will go into this once we review it. Everything that goes down on here. But like I said, this documentary is long and it is very intensive. They go into every story and tell you basically every side there is to it. There's a book that came out. I believe it's called the same topic, but there's two. There's one that was publicized by WWE, and then there's an independent one. The independent book on ECW, in my opinion, that was sort of co-written by Shane Douglas, is a lot better in my mind. But, hey, if you can sit down and read some books, you can be the judge on that one. But this one came with some extras. We've got the Pitbulls versus Raven and Stevie Richards, 2 out of 3 falls in a dog collar match for the ECW titles at 1995. Mysterio versus Psychosis. This, of course, would be the match where they just brawl outside, and Rey Mysterio hits the Hurricanrana on Psychosis, just outside in a parking lot on the ground. Mickey Whipwreck versus the Sandman, ladder match for the ECW Championship. This would be in 1995. Too Cold Scorpio versus Sabu. CyberSlam 96. Tommy Dreamer versus Raven. WrestlePalooza 97. Taz and Bam Bam Bigelow from Living Dangerously in Asbury Park in 1998. We've got Rob Van Dam versus Jerry Lynn in 1999. We've got Stevie Richards apologizing for leaving ECW. Taz speaks Paul Heyman's blessings, and Paul Heyman travel agent stories. So that is everything that packs this one. Lots of pictures on here that go along with the stories, but this is one that honestly you're going to have to take my word for it. If you don't have this, go on the WWE Network and watch the documentary there. If not, and you've never seen this, you're possibly missing out on one of the best WWE DVDs of all time. So, let me know what you guys think. Peace. Talk to you guys later. Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today. Last night, I was laying there looking at the WWE Network, wondering what I was going to watch. Honestly, it was a battle between Hulu and Netflix, whether if I was going to watch Seinfeld or The Office to fall asleep. And then I was like, hey, let's check out an ancient WWE documentary that we haven't watched in a while. And I picked The Rise and Fall of ECW, which is a pretty weird pick when you're looking for something to fall asleep to, because this documentary ranks in at about 2.5 hours. This honestly is probably one of the best documentaries that WWE has ever done with their DVD series. Going all the way back, because of the rise and fall of ECW, it gave ECW a relaunch pay-per-view, One Night Only, which then turned around into One Night Only 2, with John Cena versus Rob Van Dam, and then gave ECW its relaunch, with basically giving them its own TV show, giving us WWE ECW, which is debatable whether if you liked it or if you didn't like it, whether if it ranks up there with ECW, which gave us the debut of CM Punk on WWE TV. But it's all because of this. It's all because of Rob Van Dam, Joey Styles, Tommy Dreamer. The list goes on and on. Paul Heyman, they sat down everyone who was basically under WWE contract at this time. If you go back, I want to say that basically, I don't think Raven is a part of this documentary, but this was done at a time when a lot of ECW talent was under contract, and just about everybody who's anybody is interviewed and is on here. Raven is probably one of the only guys that was wrestling for TNA at the time that this came out. I know that over the next couple of years, guys would leave, but it's not like that NWO The Revolution documentary, where if they would have waited a year, they would have got Bischoff, they would have got new interviews with Hogan and lots of things. All right, now that the introduction is done, I'm more than likely going to have to talk really fast through this time, because 2.5 hours in a matter of 15-minute video is going to be really good. They talk about the early days of ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling. This was put on by Todd Gordon in Philadelphia, and basically it was being booked, and the wrestler who was in charge basically had a falling out with ECW, and Paul Heyman was brought in. At that time, Paul Heyman had been let go by WCW, and personally had a vendetta against who was running WCW, who was Bill Watts, for letting him go and pushing him out of the company. Paulie Dangerously was a pretty over manager at the time, and some people thought that basically ECW was just sort of a pit stop for Paul Heyman on the road to going to the WWF, but that was something that didn't happen for a long time. And in the matter of being there, Paul Heyman noticed there was a change in society. Mostly he put down that there was a change in music. And because of that, he thought wrestling needed a change, because so many people were doing the same thing over and over and over again. And at this time, of course, WWE, at that time WWF, was going through a real demise where basically they were killing themselves. Vince had the steroid trial, which led to a lot of guys going to WCW. At that time, you were seeing guys like the Duke Dumpster Drosy. There was just lots of doinks, bad characters that they felt like it had to be. ECW wanted to become, I guess, more real and have more characters that were like people that were in the stands watching the TV or I guess you can say being at the shows themselves. From there, we get the biggest stars of the company. You get Public Enemy. All of these wrestlers, all of these teams brought something to the company that put them over the top. Terry Funk was probably the one person that Paul Heyman gave the most credit to. We had Terry Funk coming in, who was a person from the last generation of wrestling that had a character that was tough, that could fight the extreme, and had enough name credibility coming in that you would think that this guy's going to come in and he's going to beat everybody. But Terry Funk came in with the mindset that he had to basically get the next era of wrestling ready to take over, and basically just picked out guy after guy that he was going to put over, make them bigger than they were today, make sure that he did something special with them that people were going to remember. One of the first ever feuds or things that happened in ECW that got mainstream attention was Sandman and Tommy Dreamer, where basically Tommy Dreamer came in as this white meat babyface kind of guy. He actually wore tights, and on his tights were suspenders. He thought that was something that was going to make him more special than somebody else, I guess you can say, or stand out. He was the pretty boy, and the Sandman beat him in a Singapore cane match, which was made famous at the time by a kid who got caught. I think he was spray painting cars in Singapore, and they actually caned him in public. And that was the way that they, I guess you can say, taught people their lesson in that country. Even though that doesn't translate to America, and America was up in arms at the time, that's what they did. For Sandman to try and beat Tommy Dreamer, but Dreamer kept getting up shot after shot after shot, trying to get the Sandman's respect, asking him to hit him again, and this is something that got Tommy Dreamer over with the ECW fans, somebody who was not going to quit, somebody who was not going to give up, somebody who came in from WCW, a part of a talent exchange due to I guess you can say it was due to a lawsuit, was Cactus Jack. Cactus Jack at the time, I believe, was either the television champion or the tag team champion, and he came in and he lost the match right out of the gate, and he spit on the WCW title, saying it didn't mean anything to him, and that basically he felt like he had hurt his pride by losing in ECW. But he was somebody who came in just like Terry Funk, who got it and figured out what Paul Heyman was really working for and wanted to really be a part of what was going down, and became one of the mainstays of ECW until the day he left to go be Mankind in the WWF. The Extreme era began as what we know as Extreme Championship Wrestling, when Shane Douglas beat Too Cold Scorpio in a tournament to become the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. At the time he was given the belt, he threw it down and basically said that this title belt hasn't meant anything in the last 7 years, and that he was crowning the new Eastern Championship Wrestling Heavyweight Championship as the Extreme Wrestling Championship, and it was the only championship that was going to mean anything. At this point, ECW pulled out of the NWA, and then christened themselves Extreme Championship Wrestling, moving them into a new direction, which sort of separated them away, and it also was one of those other things that put them on the map to get them going. We talk about the fact of the Monday Night War going on at this time between WCW and WWE, trying to become who was going to be the main brand of wrestling in the United States. During this, we see a lot of talent from ECW being picked up and being put on their shows. We had a little bit of a squirmel in there because Paul Heyman had become the main booker and started taking things over. Todd Gordon, who had started ECW, was still a part of the picture, but mainly was just like a Jack Tunney, where he was just a TV figurehead at the time. But he still had a connection to the company, he still had a connection to the wrestlers, and Terry Taylor from WCW had reached out and basically said, "We'll give you a job in WCW if you can get a main number of talent from ECW to sign and come over." A big part of this was Bill Alfonso, and I don't think we've ever seen a list of what wrestlers were supposed to come, but it all fell out from there, where basically this is where Todd Gordon gets fired because Paul Heyman learns of the scheme. He finds some way to hack into Todd Gordon's cell phone. He plays the voicemails. He plays them for Taz. He plays them for Tommy Dreamer. And this is where basically Todd Gordon exits. Bill Alfonso, who was also a part of the scheme, had a match against Beulah McGillicuddy where actually he just got the living shit kicked out of himself, and he was able to show ECW as well as the wrestlers, the crew, that, you know, he might have done something wrong, but he still really wanted to be a part of this company, and they kept him on until the dying days of ECW because of that. But even though they were able to stop this one sort of, you know, ECW invasion of WCW, guys were, you know, using ECW as a rotating door. Definitely ECW was not able to compete with WCW style money or WWE style money. So, you know, the people could come work there, they could rise their talent, and then you know, they could leave. People that would take advantage of this were guys like Stevie Richards, you know, who would be in charge of the BWO. Al Snow came over actually in a WWF talent exchange, where basically WWF was signing wrestlers, didn't have a place for them to be on television, but wanted to get them exposure, wanted to get them over, and would send them to ECW to wrestle in front of a live crowd, almost like their own developmental. Al Snow came in. Basically, they found a head gimmick that worked for him, where he basically talked to the head. This is where this was born, and you know, it kept going from there. One of the big stories in the rise and fall of ECW would be ECW needing to make more money to be able to stay afloat. And one of the things that they needed to be able to do, because they were living on syndication fees, was basically get on pay-per-view, where fans could buy their shows once a month to watch the pay-per-views, and that would be a lot of money that would come in to help pay for wrestlers and help pay for production costs, travel, lots of other things. And they were on the board, where ECW finally fought hard enough to get their own ECW pay-per-view, and then it was all killed because of an incident that happened called the Mass Transit incident, where basically one wrestler could not make the show. I believe it was Axel Rotten, and had to be replaced by a local talent. This local talent that came to ECW said that they were a trained wrestler, said they were over the age of 18, and then over the course of setting this matchup, found out the fact that this wrestler wasn't trained, lied about their age, and they still put him in the ring. New Jack, basically was supposed to just beat the living shit out of this guy, make him bleed. But, you know, one of the things that wrestlers learn is that, you know, giving yourself your first blade job is not as easy as it thinks, because you start getting in your mind this is going to hurt. And New Jack was, you know, telling this guy to blade, and he wouldn't do it. Finally, New Jack just did it himself and just beat the living crap out of this kid and left him laying there, which was later turned into big lawsuits with the son's father suing the company. And, you know, just the outcry that came out of this is that ECW loses their pay-per-view. After time, they find another way. They get back to the point where they're going to get on pay-per-view. Vince McMahon actually reaches out to Paul Heyman and ECW, giving them mainstream exposure by putting them on Monday Night Raw. At this time, Raw was getting their ass kicked by Nitro and was looking for anything different to separate themselves. So through this, we see Chris Candido, we see Sabu, we see Taz, we see the Dudleys, we see Rob Van Dam, all for the first time on Monday Night Raw, setting up a WWE versus ECW style of rivalry. We see, Jerry Lawler start a feud against ECW, which would become one of ECW's main storylines going on, of them ECW then bringing in Jerry Lawler, which would mean that basically they're bringing in WWF. We see Sabu, we see Rob Van Dam jump ship to be teaming with Jerry Lawler, fighting against them, and just building one heck of a storyline, which lead to their first pay-per-view. On the first pay-per-view, when they're drawing up their card, they leave off Rob Van Dam. Definitely one of the biggest their main talents, but due to an injury to Chris Candido, Rob Van Dam, it gets put on the pay-per-view in a match against Lance Storm, where Rob Van Dam has to go out and basically give the performance of a lifetime, thinking that this is the company that screwed him over. We're gonna skip through a ton of stuff, basically just getting to the end of ECW, where basically they finally get everything they're looking for. They finally get on TNN. They finally get a video game. Both of those things probably led to the downfall of the company. TNN, once they got them, figured out they didn't really want them. They were using them as a springboard, trying to get WWE and Monday Night Raw. With the Monday Night Raw deal comes a deal that basically they're the only company that's going to be on TNN, giving ECW basically their walking papers that they're going to have to be there until they debut Raw, and then they're canceled. They're done. In order to get a video game, which they thought was going to bring in a lot of money for them, I think they had to give away like 40% of the company. To a company that makes video games, that just wanted to have control of the company, but didn't really want anything to do with it. If you're going to make money, we want some of the money. But other than that, you're on your own. So that sort of screws them over. Once they get the TNN deals, Taz and the Dudleys leave ECW. Bam, they're done. They were smart. They were able to reinvent characters. Just Incredible became their champion, and sort of rode out the last days. I know other wrestlers sort of stood up and became bigger than they had been at the time, but the writing was on the wall. I believe it was in 2001. ECW closed the doors and they were done. Paul Heyman debuted on Monday Night Raw, and that was kind of like, all right, the last things that's going to happen is done. And ECW closed their doors. They ended up going into bankruptcy, where WWF would, buy the licensing fees. They would buy the tape library, and basically everything else was let out to things. But this documentary they did way better than they ever thought they would do. I mean, this sold millions of copies. I'm sure that they thought it was going to sell hundreds of thousands of copies, and it led to the birth of ECW, getting a comeback of pay-per-views as well as their own TV shows. So if you haven't seen this, if you've never seen this, it's on the WWE Network. I'm sure you can pick up this documentary on Amazon, used for just a couple of bucks, and it'll get dusty, just like mine. Peace out, everybody.